Hello there. This is Caleb Jones, and this is the Alpha Male 2.0 podcast. And if you're watching the video version of this, I am doing this podcast from my temporary American office. I will be in the collapsing USA for the next 2.5 months or so. Unfortunately, I'm having a really fun time watching not only the economic collapse of the United States, which I predicted a long time ago, but the cultural collapse of the United States, which I didn't predict. I didn't know this would happen. It is amazingly and utterly fascinating to me to watch this occur, to watch things like, just two random examples off the top of my head, I gave you hundreds from the last 10 years or so. They make a He-Man Masters of the Universe TV show, and they take He-Man out of it. He's not in it. And instead they make the star his female co-star, and they make her the main character along with her black lesbian girlfriend. And more amazingly, that's one thing. We live in a left-wing world. None of that surprised me. That's just par for the course these days. But what was amazing is that the makers of this TV show, when everyone freaked out and didn't like this, they were shocked. Like, what? What? How could you not like this? All of our hard left Hollywood friends love the idea. Why don't you like this idea? We love He-Man. We think this is great. They were so surprised. I think they were legitimately surprised that people didn't like it. Goddamn, they make a Boba Fett TV show, and they take Boba Fett, the coolest character in the entire Star Wars franchise, and they turn him into this sweet, kind, gentle, very stupid beta male who doesn't know how to do anything and has other people tell him to do everything. He doesn't make any decisions on his own, and he's completely idiotic, and he does everything wrong. And then halfway into the series, they take him out of the series. He's gone because they're idiots and they don't know what they're doing. It is so amazing to watch this collapse, to watch the cultural norms just collapse in on itself in terms of the Western world. It's just fascinating to watch. George Carlin was right. He said, the collapse of the Western world is a tragedy. It's sad, but the good news is you have a front row seat to the greatest civilizational collapse we have ever seen in all of human history, even far beyond what the Roman Empire went through. It's amazing. It's just endlessly fascinating. And now that I don't live in the United States anymore, I have a much different view on this. I can kind of view it from afar because I care less and less. Every year I get older, I care less and less about this stuff because, as usual, people did this to themselves. But anyway, I digress. This podcast is going to be the first of two podcasts. It's going to be a two-parter. In this podcast, I'm going to talk about dating as an older man. And then the next Alpha Male 2.0 podcast, I'm going to talk about dating as a younger man. So I'll cover both bases. And just to remind you, I have a second podcast called the Sovereign CEO Podcast that comes out every week. And so if you're interested in that, that's all the business information, international information, all that stuff I cover in that podcast. In this podcast, it's the Alpha Male 2.0 podcast. I cover mostly lifestyle and dating and things like that. You can go to calebjones.com and click podcast, and you can subscribe to the Sovereign CEO Podcast on all of your favorite podcast platforms. So you can listen to both of these podcasts every week. Instead of just one podcast, we can get two. Kind of cool. All right, so let's talk about dating as an older man. Now, as always, I use very specific definitions for the words that I use. When I mean older man, I mean a man that is over the age of 35. 35 is the line between an older man and a younger man. So if you are under the age of 35, you are, in my opinion, a younger man. You're a young dude. You're a young'un, okay? If you're 32, you're a young guy. If you're 25, you're a young guy. You're a young guy. And so you have younger man problems, younger man desires, and you're probably living a younger man lifestyle, unless you're an unusual exception to the rule. And maybe you are. When I was a younger man, I was living an older man lifestyle, but I'm a weirdo and I was the exception to the rule. So if you're over the age of 35, you are an older man. Now, you're not necessarily an old man. There's a difference between old and older. I am an older man. I am not an old man. I'm getting there, rapidly approaching that day. And sometimes I make jokes about how old I am, but I am not old yet. But I am definitely an older man. I'm about to turn 50 in about a month. And so I'm an older man, I'm not a young man, but if you're, 37, 45, 42, 51, you're an older man, you're not an old man. Well, Caleb, what is old man? I would say that old man is over 60. So when you hit 60, I think you cross over from older into old. That doesn't mean you're literally walking around with a walker or a cane. If you look at guys who I consider role models for anti-aging, guys like, Sylvester Stallone, guys in their 70s who are very young and spry and have muscles and look great. You don't have to be an old man just because you're crossed over age 60, but certainly once you cross over age 60, I would say that you're an old man. You can be a quality old man, or you can be a shitty old man. That's up to you. And so I've got 10 more years before I cross that line. But time flies. 10 years is going to go by pretty quick. So this podcast is specifically for you guys who are older men over the age of 35 in terms of dating as an older man. So here are some of the factors that you need to pay attention to that you probably did not need to pay attention to as a younger man. Number one, top of the list, anti-aging. The alpha male 2.0 will never be monogamous. So that means we older guys do not have the luxury of the typical beta male and or many alpha male 1.0s or most alpha male 1.0s who eventually surrender to monogamy, because the vast majority of alpha male 1.0s eventually at some point in their lives, usually in 30s or 40s, sometimes 50s, surrender to monogamy and become monogamous beta males, or at a minimum live by monogamous beta males. Those men and the beta males have the option, quote unquote, of aging like shit. They can go ahead and get bald, they can get fat, they can let their skin go to shit, they can start walking around with a stoop, they can start dressing 20 years out of date and looking like dorks. They can start doing that because they believe, once they've settled down with their wife, they believe incorrectly that the wife is going to stay forever, and so they don't need to date anymore, so they don't need to worry about this anymore. I've had numerous discussions with numerous beta males throughout my entire life, going back to even when I was a young man, of guys who would get married and immediately just start getting fat or getting that big bald spot. And they go, I don't care, I'm married. So these men, now we could argue about how stupid these men are, that they're gonna get divorced and they probably shouldn't let their looks go, but whatever. They believe they have that option. You do not have that option. So as alpha male 2.0, you will never be monogamous, which means at least sporadically throughout the rest of your life until you die, you will be in scenarios occasionally where you have to bring new women into your sex life, which means you have to look reasonably good for your age as long as you can, for as far as you can, as best you can. And I realize that's harder as you get older, but that's your objective. My objective, I've said this many times, is to look as close to age 37 as I'm able to look. I believe that age 37 is the age at which men max their physical attractiveness, not their personality attractiveness or not their income and that stuff. I'm talking about physically, men peak in terms of physical, 100% physical attractiveness around age 37 or so. So my objective is to look as close to 37 as I possibly can for the rest of my life as best as I am able. I don't want to look 25. I don't want to look 20. Girls want to look 20 or 25. Girls are different. But us dudes, I think men look better in their late 30s than they do in their 20s, so that's my objective. This is not a podcast on anti-aging. I talk a lot about that in my other materials, some of my free stuff, some of my online courses go to detail about that. Matter of fact, I'm probably gonna do a full video course on anti-aging probably this year, because it's getting to be a popular topic. But I'm just saying to you, that is a priority, anti-aging. Now there's two aspects of anti-aging. There's anti-aging on the outside, looking reasonably young on the outside, your skin, your hair, your teeth, your fashion, things like that, your posture, certainly your body fat percentage, you want to turn into a fat ass, things like that. But there's also the internal stuff, testosterone, estrogen, thyroid, vitamin D, all these hormones that are super, super critical. You have to have optimized at all times, that I have optimized at all times. I've said it 1,000 times. I am 50 years old. I have the testosterone of an 18-year-old man. Okay, not bad. My estrogen is at perfect levels. My thyroid is at perfect levels. My vitamin D is 52. It's at perfect levels. These things are at perfect levels because I make goddamn sure they are, and I get the blood tests once, twice, 3 times a year to make sure they are. And I'm gonna do that for the rest of my life. Other things too, for example, my red blood cell count. I pay attention to that because I'm on TRT. Sometimes that rises over time, so I make sure that's under 50. My RBC count, that ensures that I will probably never suffer from a stroke ever because my RBC count is so low. So I'm checking all these things constantly because I wanna maximize the amount of physical energy and the physical drive, sexual prowess, all these things as I get into my older years. Okay? Now again, if I was an incel, if I never had sex, or if I was a beta male married to a dominant wife who kicked my ass, I probably wouldn't need to worry about these things. But the alpha male 2.0 follows a different path. So as an older guy, you gotta pay attention to this. Your hair loss, you gotta deal with your hair. I addressed my hair many, many years ago. You gotta dress your teeth. If you're getting really, really fat, you gotta lose some weight. Now, obviously, I'm not an expert at that, but I'm not fat. I'm not a big fat fuck. I'm overweight, but I'm not a big fat ass, and I have a family full of fat asses. So I could be much, much, much worse than I am, and I have been much, much worse than I am. So all these factors come into play. Very, very, very important. And by the way, this is important regardless of whether or not you want to date younger women. Sometimes I will talk to older guys and I'll talk about anti-aging and how important it is. And they will say, well, I don't want to have sex young. I don't want to bang 18-year-olds. I don't want to bang 22-year-olds. I like to date women in my own age, like women in their 30s and 40s. Nothing to do with it. I'm sorry, dude. Nothing to do with it. Women in their 30s like older men who look younger too. Women in their 40s like older men who look younger too. As a matter of fact, I was just talking to my wife about this. I was looking at a bunch of people on my personal Facebook page of people I went to high school with. So these are people all in their late 40s. And I look at the men. And by and large, these men look like shit. These men look terrible. Bald, terrible skin, wrinkles. They looked old, fat in many cases, looked like crap, including the men who were the really good-looking, cool guys back in high school. The jocks who were really physically fit, looked really great. These guys look fucking terrible. I mean, I would say easily 7, 8 out of 10 looked like shit. Maybe 1 or 2 looked okay. Maybe 1 was still good looking. 1 out of 10 at best. And so imagine if you're in a dating pool, if you're in your 50s or 60s, and you want to date women in their 40s, and you look like you're in your 40s versus most men in their 40s look like shit, it'll be a lot easier for you, isn't it? So this is irrelevant in terms of the age of the women that you like to date. Anti-aging is important no matter what, and you have to do it for the rest of your life. Okay, that's the first factor. Second factor is, I kind of segued this, what is the age range of the women you want to date? And I notice a lot of older guys really don't give that a lot of thought. Do you want to date younger women? Do you hate younger women? Do you want to exclusively date women who are kind of in their 30s? Do you hate women in their 30s? Because there's both categories, right? There are older men who get real excited about dating much younger girls in their 20s or late teens that are legal, and they get real excited about this. And there are men who are the same age who think that's disgusting and gross, or they just have no interest because I don't want to go on a date with a 19-year-old, let her talk about her dog on Instagram. I can't stand that, Caleb. Great, that's fine. Then who do you want to date? You should sit down and make a decision on the age range of the type of women you want to date and make that as specific as possible because it's going to help you calibrate your approach, your frame, the models, the modes you use in dating in terms of online dating, day game, night game, social circle game, things like that. You need to be aware of this. I've noticed a lot, for some reason, a lot of older guys really don't give thought to this. They're just like, I just want to date. I just want to get laid, or I want a girlfriend, or, they don't really think about, well, I don't want to date under this age or over that age. I mean, yes, guys will say, well, I don't want to date I don't want to date a woman who's 65. Okay, fine. I don't talk about who you don't want to date. I'm talking about who you do want to date. What is the specific age range? Throughout most of my evolution, my age range was 18 to 32. And I rarely would date older than 32 for the many reasons I've discussed before. Women over 33 have higher ASD. They're harder to get to sex very quickly. I was not interested in going on 3, 4, 5, 6 dates to wait to have sex for the first time. I'm not going to do that. I'm too busy. My time is too valuable. Various other reasons. And so that was the model that I chose. Matter of fact, over time, I dropped that from 18 to 27. And then when I wanted to settle down with someone, I raised that up to mid-30s because I wanted to settle down with a woman who was in her mid-30s. I've talked about that many times before. I didn't want to settle down with a woman who was really young because that's not the person she's going to be. If you settle down with a woman who's 20, within 3 or 4 years, you're going to wake up next to a very different woman. And the odds are overwhelming she's not going to be around anymore because she will want different things, I promise you. Whereas if you settle down with a woman who's in her mid-30s, she's not going to do very much changing. That's pretty much who she is. Now, women change all the time, of course, but you'll have much less of that if you marry or settle down with someone who's older. Now, that's just my thing. If you would never settle down with a woman who's 35 because you think their ovaries are dried up or whatever stupid reason you have, fine. Again, decide what age range you want to date, either casually or seriously. Know this and focus on that age range. That way it solves a lot of problems. Now you know exactly how to present yourself. Now you know exactly what mediums to use to meet women and so on. Let me take it aside and talk about that. So most men, when they hit around age 35, older, start thinking about settling down when they hadn't prior to that. I have talked about this on my books and my blogs. I think it is a very bad idea in terms of finding a woman to settle down with who is under the age of 25. I think that's a very, 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 very bad idea. Any OLTR, serious OLTR relationship, that means girlfriend or wife, where you have long-term expectations of many, many years, 10 years plus, you do not want a woman who's less than 25. And the reason is what I just said earlier. If she's under the age of 25, she's going to go through some radical changes and want very different things by the time she hits 25. And I've experienced this personally because I've had long-term relationships with women that young. And I promise you, the woman she is at 22 is radically different than the woman she is at 26. Completely different. She will want completely different things, have a completely different outlook on life. They go through a lot of changes at that age. And so do you want to settle down in a long-term relationship with long-term expectations with a woman who is not fully formed yet? And I'm not just talking about the fact her brain hasn't fully formed, although that's true too. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about her evolution as a human being. So if you want to settle down with someone, perfectly fine. Make sure it's an OLTR marriage, please. Do not be monogamous. Do not co-own anything with her. Okay? Prenuptial agreement, enforceable prenuptial agreement if you get legally married, enforceable cohabitation agreement if you live in the Western world, non-monogamy, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to go through all that again. You know my stuff. Okay, so make sure it's that. But again, I would draw a line at 25 and go up from there. Again, I purposely wanted someone in her mid-30s. And what I wanted was someone in her mid-30s or so who looked like she was in her 20s. And that's exactly who I settled down with, Pink Firefly. That's exactly who she was. I met her when she was 33. She looked about 26. And she still looks super, super young. It's kind of crazy. So there you go. Next thing you need to address is children. And if you already have had your kids and you're done, you can ignore this part. If you've had a vasectomy, you can ignore this part. Everyone else who is over the age of 35, men are waiting longer and longer to have kids, which is a good thing. The problem is I'm talking to a lot of men these days, older men over 35, who still have not made that decision on whether or not to have kids. So here's my bottom line on children. I've done videos on this. I've done articles about this. I've written about this in my book. So on blogs, I've talked about this in detail. You do not have children in the modern day Western world unless your desire to have children on a scale from 1 to 10 is an 8 or higher. That means you really, really, really want to have kids. It's very, very important to you. It's a very, very exciting thing for you. Then go ahead and have kids, provided you make a lot of money. I'll cover that in a second. But most guys who I talk to who have not yet had kids, who are in their 30s or 40s, when I ask them, do you want kids? They go, well, okay. Well, is not an 8, 9, or 10, okay? Well, means you are well below 8. That means you should not have kids. So if I ask you right now, do you want to have kids? And your thought is, well, I mean, that means no. Do not have children. In the modern era, having children is more difficult now than it has ever been before in all of modern history. It is also more expensive now than in all of modern history. I would be horrified to have children today. I'm not saying you don't have kids. I have 2 children. I'm just telling you how I feel. I would be horrified to actually have babies today and raise kids today in this environment, in the collapsing Western world, with the political environment the way it is, with people the way they are, with social media the way it is, with cell phones the way they are. I mean, it was hard enough for my parents when I had Saturday morning cartoons in the 80s. That was difficult enough, okay? It's so much more difficult now to raise children. And so that is something you only want to do if you're really, really 100% confident you really, really want to do it. If you kind of want to do it, what's going to happen is this. And here's why I'm saying this to you. Here's what's going to happen when you guys, and this is the majority of you guys over 35, you go, well, I don't know, I guess I could have kids. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get one-itis for a girl who is, quote, not like the rest. You're going to settle down with her, and she is going to want to have kids. She's going to be, in her desire, an 8, a 9, or a 10, and you're going to be at a 3 or a 4, but because you went, oh, I don't know, you will succumb to her desires, and you will end up having children. And you will be fucking miserable for the next 20 years of your life. And I have seen this happen over and over and over and over and over again with men in the modern era. I don't mean you hate your kids. I don't mean you won't have times with your kids you'll enjoy. I didn't say that. I said your overall level of happiness will drop like a stone for the next 20 years because you had kids when you didn't really want to have kids. You just succumbed to her. By the way, one of the criteria I wanted for the woman I settled down with was a woman who either could not have any children, did not want to have any kids, or worst case, they already had kids who were like teenagers and getting ready to leave the house. Okay, I did not want to settle down with a woman who wanted to have more kids with me because I'm done having kids. I already had 2, I'm good. And I didn't want to settle down with a woman who had small kids so I could do the whole stepdad thing. I already did that once. I don't want to do it again. That was hard. So I'm not going to do that again. So that was my criteria. Again, to see the differences, see how I thought these things through before I settled down? That's what you have to do. Kids, lifestyle structures, type of woman you want to settle down with, age of woman, all that stuff. You need to sit down and figure that out. And if you haven't figured that out, it is dangerous for you to date anyone above the MLTR level. And I mean that seriously. If you have not figured these things out, you should not date anyone above the MLTR level, because what's going to happen is, again, you're going to get real excited for some girl who's going to want a bunch of shit that you really don't want, like moving in together and or having kids together or what have you. And you're going to succumb because you are not confident in what you want. You're just like, well, I don't know, I guess I could have kids. That is the worst condition to which to have kids. Now, the other thing about having kids, I'll say this really quick, this is a very big topic off the topic of this podcast, is that you better be making a strong 6-figure income or higher, or have a lot of money in your net worth if you want to have kids in the Western world. Now, if you're outside the Western world, go ahead and do whatever you want. But if you live in United States, Canada, Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, you live in these countries and you plan on staying in these countries, you're insane. But okay, if you plan on staying in these countries the rest of your life and raising kids in these countries, I hope you make a 6-figure income, and or I hope you're a multimillionaire, because that's what it's going to take. Okay, if you don't have that, it's going to suck you dry financially to raise kids today. It's going to be a nightmare. It was hard when I had kids in the 90s. It was hard when I did it. Now it's really hard in terms of finances. Be aware of these things. So that's it for men in terms of older guys, in terms of dating. In the next podcast next week, I will reverse course and we'll talk about younger men. You guys who are under the age of 35, the things that you have to consider when you date and or get into relationships. I will see you in a week. Have fun. Bye.